Hello, and welcome back to another Chris McPherson Show Daily Dose, digging back into the NBL Power Rankings again this week and looking forward to giving you some updates on what's happening around the hoops world here in Australia. If you're joining us for the first time or you haven't hit the button before, make sure to subscribe down below, whether you're watching on YouTube or on your favourite podcast platform. Make sure you get involved and stay on board so you keep up to date with everything that is coming to you across our episodes dropping each and every week. We are dropping them fairly regularly at the moment, so you want to keep up to date with those, the watch-alongs on YouTube, and much, much more. You can also find us on your favourite social media platforms at The Chris Mack Show. It is your home of keeping up to date with all of your sport in between the episodes. But let's get it up and started talking NBL Power Rankings. We are right into the season, heading towards that FIBA break. There's some really crucial moments and crucial things from the weekend to get through. And we start our power rankings at the bottom. And unfortunately, there is no movement at the bottom for Cairns Taipans fans. It has been a rough season, and it keeps getting rougher. They sit 3-11 on the season thus far, and it just doesn't seem to be able to turn that tide for the Taipans. They won 2 of their first 3. Things looked promising, but you do the maths, and that now means they've won 1 of their last 11 games, and that's just not where they need to be. 1 game that they've won since the end of September. So in almost 2 months, they've won just 1. It starts to talk to, despite the fact that they've spent big and stacked up this roster that looks so talented, they just haven't been able to get it to gel on the floor. They've had some injuries, they've had some outs, they've had some issues, but there's no real excuses for this underperformance of Adam Ford's team. It's a challenging time for the Taipans, and you have to question what to next and where they turn the corner. They continue to underperform, underdeliver, and now they head to their final games heading into this FIBA break, and they've got the New Zealand Breakers. Now, the Breakers, another side that haven't been exactly shooting their house down consistently, so maybe a winnable game. There were some glimpses in that game against Adelaide, but again, Cairns let that one get away from them last weekend, and that leaves some bigger question marks after that loss. Then it probably leaves answers. So what can they do here? Can McVeigh lead the way? Can we see some more from the likes of an Admiral Schofield? What are we going to see? They've got some good pieces, Mojave King and the like as well. So what is that going to deliver? It's just getting them all to gel. That's the big question. But that's got the Taipans still sitting in 10th place. Coming in 9th place, and it was splitting hairs here between 8 and 9, but it is the New Zealand Breakers. They showed their absolute best on Wednesday night in the Ignite Cup game. The Ignite Cup game seemed to be getting the best out of the Breakers. They're sitting right up the top of the Ignite standings, which is positive for them, possibly some more prize money and another deliverable into the Breakers locker room, which would be positive. But the big thing here is the inconsistencies and the inability to deliver the same thing on a regular basis. We've seen PJC can be absolutely one of the best players in this league, diminutive, but gets it done. That powerful left that he can fire off and draw players in against, that just keeps on firing. But the others around him aren't always delivering at that same level. Karim Lopez, the next star. Sam Menenga, again, can be lights out, but he's diamonds or dust. It just seems to be that they're not quite getting to where they need to. Rob Baker doing well at times, but then at other times goes missing. So it was an interesting weekend for them. As I said, a big win on the Wednesday. They lost then over in Perth to the Wildcats, and that started to raise some questions. It was a pretty comfortable win in the end for the Wildcats, 88-75, and we needed to see more fight from the Breakers in that game. As we said, they now head into a weekend ahead of the international break where a lot of their players will be in action for the Tall Blacks up against the Boomers, which will be interesting to see how they go in national colours. But they have that big game against Cairns. They really need to win that one and close it out. Otherwise, it could be panic stations. They're really struggling to be consistently closing out fourth quarters. We've seen this a number of times from the Breakers. The only times they seem to be getting the wins is when they've absolutely put teams to the sword early on, as we saw on Wednesday night. But you can always hark back to that game only a matter of weeks ago where they played the Bullets at home, led by 25 in the second quarter, and then got rolled down again against a team that, let's be honest, hasn't exactly been setting the world on fire. So a really interesting one for them. It's going to really be a focus point this weekend. They've got to get the job done against the Taipans up there in Cairns to prove that they're not an absolute cellar dweller and to improve this 4-10 record that has them somewhat with their backs against the wall. Moving on to number 8, and as I said, it's splitting hairs here, but it is the Brisbane Bullets. These guys were a really hard team to really rank this weekend after what we'd seen from them in the lead up. Again, we talked about it just before, that shocker on Wednesday night, throw in the Casey Prather injury, and things were starting to look a little grim. They went to Melbourne United, and you thought that the ladder leaders might put a 50-point margin on them. However, the Bullets showed some fight and took it to Melbourne United despite a depleted lineup. So I think there's some positives there. Throw in the fact that now they've got some key pieces coming. Javon Freeman-Liberty's going to return. We know that they've sent Jalen Adams out to pasture, but also Terry Taylor incoming as well, which is going to be an interesting one. He's played in the G League as well, but as we know, that's no guarantee of delivery. But a couple of sparks to come in. Taylor will come in as a replacement for Prather. Freeman-Liberty comes back at the expense of Jalen Adams. So going to be a really interesting, mix for the Bullets going forward. Their record not exactly stellar at the moment, 5-9, but I'm trying to find some optimism here for these guys. And again, taking what we can from that resilient performance, I guess you'd call it, against Melbourne United. No Casey Prather, he'd been the key piece for them. Lamar Patterson delivered some glimpses again, and we've talked about him on our shows and on our live streams around what he can potentially deliver for this side, and that we think he could potentially be one of those key pieces alongside some of these imports. If they can get things going, just maybe this could be a side that could start to scrape and claw its way up towards maybe a play-in spot. Interesting weekend for them. They've got the game on Thursday night against South East Melbourne. Again, South East Melbourne, not quite the side they were a month ago, and we'll talk about them shortly. But this is a game that we need to see from Brisbane. We need to see that hustle, that effort again. And if we can see that, maybe not a win would be huge for them at this point, because that would take them to 6-9. But maybe that's where we see some glimpses from Brisbane. Let's see what we get out of Terry Taylor. Let's see what Javon Freeman-Liberty looks like on his return. Hopefully, whatever it was that ailed him before he went away is now solved, and we welcome him back. I'm sure the Bullets fraternity will be happy to have him back with open arms if he can deliver somewhere near his potential. Coming in at number 7, we have the Tasmania Jack Jumpers, and this is a side that, again, has promised so much, but at 5-8, 5 straight losses, just not quite anywhere of what they needed to be. Will Magnay's injury looks like it's going to be a little bit longer term than we first expected. He was named to line up for the Boomers next week as well. We don't think that will happen. Jack Jumpers fans will certainly hope that he doesn't risk being re-injured playing for the Boomers, but it's really concerning for them. They lost David Johnson, now Magnay. This is starting to become a bit troublesome for the Jackies, and I'm just not sure what the solution is. It's really starting to get to a point of, save the island. They've got to get their backs against the wall and really fight back and dig deep. And that might play into Scott Roth's wheelhouse, but it hasn't as of yet. And that's probably the concern as to where that shapes. We need to see some more. I talked about it last week from the likes of Tiger Campbell, Bryce Hamilton as well, just needing to step up and deliver at that next level. So it's going to be interesting. They've got a big weekend this weekend. They play Friday and Sunday over in Perth on Friday. Then they're back home to MyState Bank Arena on Sunday, where they'll take on the Sydney Kings. But again, the Jack Jumpers, they've slightly increased in our rankings, but it's probably due to underperformance from some other teams. But again, this bottom 4 is just a scrap, I think is probably the fair way to say it. It really feels like we've got 3 categories in this power rankings now. We've got the bottom 4, we've got the middle 2, and then we've got the top 4 as well. It's really starting to segregate out, and that's an opportunity for the Jack Jumpers this weekend to, if they can go 1-1 this weekend, or amazingly 2-0, but if they go to 0-7 on a run, and then they're 5-10, it's a long way back from there, and it just doesn't seem like they can turn it around. So challenging work for the men of the Apple Isle, what they can do this weekend up against some teams that are starting to show some better form in Perth and then Sydney. It's a big weekend of travel as well, 2-day turnaround coming back from Perth to home. It's going to be interesting to see what they can deliver and what that looks like. Let's move on to team number 6 in our rankings, and that coming in is the Illawarra Hawks. Coming in at number 6, they've slid 1 spot. A less than ideal result, I think it's fair to say, up against the Sydney Kings on a fresh 9-day turnaround. They should have been looking revved up and ready to go at home, but all of a sudden the Kings' defensive press undid the Hawks. And again, this is a big rivalry game. We know that the Kings are starting to come in form. They're starting to show some promising things, but I think it's fair to say that's embarrassing. There's no other word for that loss for the Hawks. The Kings found a way to really limit JaVale McGee. They closed down a lot of their offensive options of the Hawks, and that was shown when they were kept to 71 points. Those pieces that had been clicking for them and performing and doing really well came unstuck, and all of a sudden the Hawks looked back to what they looked like at the start of the season. Whether teams take that blueprint and can figure it out or not and utilize it against them, only time will tell for Illawarra. But look, I'm still not prepared to write off this side. They're in the top half for a reason. I think with the pieces they've got, they should be better than this, but they're just going to have to find some plan Bs and plan Cs. With the likes of Dave O'Hickey there, Tyler Harvey, they've got enough strength around McGee. But again, if teams can start to quiet McGee, it starts to worry you. It starts to talk to some of these other teams that are individual reliant, and what will happen if teams can find ways to silence those. And, we'll talk about that when we get to Adelaide and South East Melbourne as well, two teams that probably not to the extent of Illawarra, but certainly have a slight Achilles issue with individual players who they are heavily reliant on. But those teams have found some, well, we'll call it Plan A Mark II, maybe not quite a Plan B, but Illawarra don't even seem to have that, let alone a Plan B. So what they can do and what Justin Tatum can go back to the drawing board with and work out here is going to be a big question, and that's probably how Illawarra, sitting at number 6, could piece this together ahead of a huge weekend, or round, I should say, not so much weekend. Tonight they take on Adelaide at the Adelaide Entertainment Centre, and then Friday night they host the Melbourne United ladder leaders. So big weekend for them, hosting two of the strongest teams in the competition. And what they can do from there, if they can get a win from that, well, they well and truly cement themselves in the top 6. 2 losses, and they're starting to have, probably looks over their shoulder. 2 wins, well, all of a sudden they're a contender if they knock off both those sides. So it's a huge weekend heading into the FIBA break for the Hawks. Remembering they're the defending champions. We've seen some absolute brilliance from them. We saw them knock off Melbourne United not that long ago, but what we saw on the weekend against Sydney was just so far away from what we need from the Hawks that, again, Coach Tatum will be going right back to square one, back to the drawing board and resetting for his Hawks. Number 5, we've got the Perth Wildcats. Now, the Wildcats have been there or thereabouts. They do move up a spot this week from last week. A good performance last week, closing it out against New Zealand. They did what they needed to do, 88-75. It was a solid performance from the Wildcats, getting that done in the fourth quarter, just closing that game out when Christian Doolittle getting it done with the points and just leading the way, which was really positive. I think they need to probably sort out what their point guard solution is, especially now that Jaron Rilly's gone. I think it's going to mean that David Duke's going to need to go to the point a little bit more and lead a little bit. But it's an interesting week ahead for them, and what John Rilly now does in terms of working out who's going to run that point and orchestrate this team. His son Jaron's done a really good job there. He was probably questioned by some whether it was a nepotism move when he got the start early in the season, especially when they had some other key pieces that they've now parted ways with different ones and restructured. But he's now out of action. He's done really well, Jaron. So now what they do, I think it's got to be, as I said, David Duke going to the point, and I guess we'll see a little bit more of that this weekend. Friday night, we talked about it just before, they'll play host to Tasmania, and then into Sunday where they head over to Melbourne United. And this is a really litmus test style game for this Perth Wildcats side. And again, there's a lot of the games this weekend that I want to see things from in terms of where teams sit, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they have to have wins. I think we just need to see displays. Wins obviously go a long way. If Perth knocks off Melbourne United, my word, they're now nipping on the heels of those top 4. A bit like the Hawks in 6. They've got opportunity this weekend, so we'll see what they can conjure from this. The Wildcats, especially down really, what the new look offense will be, how they work that all out. Big test to do it. Tassie is an opportunity. Melbourne, as I said, a real litmus test for them. So we'll see how that all goes. But that's Tasmania. Friday night game is going to be big for them. Looking forward to seeing what that comes. The Perth Wildcats sitting in 5th. And now we go into our 4 teams that I essentially see as the contenders at this point. There's still some question marks over a number of them. I think it's fair to say our number 1 ranked team that hasn't changed really since the start of the season are the men with the target on their back. But we move into number 4, which is the Southeast Melbourne Phoenix. They've been there or thereabouts between 2 and 4 over recent weeks. Probably haven't quite been at their best the last few weeks, but did enough up in Cairns on the weekend. Angus Glover is cooking again, which is great to see for them. He really just seems to have like a little hot hand quarter in him every couple of weeks. Does a consistent job otherwise, but let's put that injury behind them. I don't think there's a lot between probably our third and fourth sides again. They've been solid, but again, we're going to get a real understanding this weekend as to what this team looks like. They've got a doubleheader leading into the break. Nathan Sobey still the key for these guys. We know that. They're very reliant on him if Glover's not firing, so we just need to find some more around that. If you're a Southeast Melbourne fan, there's a few other players I wouldn't mind seeing some more from, I guess, in terms of this team. Just looking at what they can deliver. Wezawundu off the bench has been really good. I've been impressed with what we've seen from him. Owen Foxwell's been creative, but again, so much of it does run through a Nathan Sobey offense that I just want to see them start to continue to find other options. Geordie Hunter getting it done, finding some points as well, and they shared that around really well in last weekend's game against Cairns. But can they do it against, I guess, a stronger opponent? Only time will tell. We're going to look at them on Thursday night up against the Bullets, and then they'll have the doubleheader Saturday up against Adelaide, and that's again a really big make or break game for a side that now sitting at 8-3. If they come out of this weekend 9-4, well, I don't think we know too much more about them. But if they come out 10-3, all of a sudden they're rocketing up those standings. And again, that game on Saturday night at John Cain Arena is going to be absolutely huge when it comes to the measure of these two teams. So looking forward to that. Moving on to number 3, and it is the Adelaide 36ers. Again, they've got the man who's sitting in the box seat for MVP conversations. A 2-0 weekend for them. They got it done against Cairns despite some scares. They beat Tasmania. And again, they're winning the games they need to win. They're sitting 9-3. Bryce Cotton, he peeled off 41-odd points in that overtime win against Cairns. They've now brought in Troy Brown Jr. I just want to see a bit more from the defensive press, a bit more pressure there. They're not always going to be able to rely on just Bryce Cotton's hand to make sure that they outscore every team when they come up against some of these contenders in the big games. And that's probably the question for me. Is we saw it with the Kings shutting down McGee. We saw it when the Kings played Adelaide earlier this year. They shut down Cotton. The same for Southeast Melbourne with Nathan Sobey. If those players get shut down, what does it then look like? And for Adelaide, because their defence isn't quite at that championship calibre at the moment, I think that leaves them quite vulnerable. So it'd be interesting to see what that looks like. They've got an interesting weekend. They've got Illawarra into Southeast Melbourne, 2 challenging games for them and a great chance for them to, first on their home court tonight, put it up, and then head over to John Cain Arena for that Saturday night game and really go into that FIBA break, demonstrating to us that they should be a top 2 team even in this league. And, it's starting to look that they've got the potential there, but they're just not quite delivering it. I know they sit there on record at the moment, but I think there's, as we'll talk about in a moment, a team sitting in second in our power rankings who right now I would almost take over any team in the competition the way they're playing, but there's a big question mark over that and how they deal with it. So on that note, moving on to number 2, which is the Sydney Kings in our power rankings in Sydney. They hold down the number 2 spot for the second week in a row. 4 wins on the trot, a clinical job against their rivals in Illawarra. Like Illawarra, they had a long break coming into this game, coming off a 7-day turnaround after that win over the Breakers at home. They head in now and, again, get a nice break heading into a game against Tasmania. They are absolutely cooking, pardon the pun. 4 straight wins. They absolutely smashed their rivals, the Hawks, 27 points. Xavier Cooks, we're starting to see MVP basketball from him again, which is absolutely phenomenal as a Kings fan. You've got to be excited to see that. That is great. We're seeing he and KD are really working out their combination. Bull Qual, Quatnoy, these guys are really playing their roles so well, and they're setting the tone, setting the tempo, doing great things. Everyone's doing what they need to. But the elephant in the room for Brian Goorjian is the fact they've been doing this without Matthew Dellavedova. So what does he do when Matthew Dellavedova comes back? Does he limit his minutes and make him a role player off the pine? I think that's the right solution, but whether or not he can do that with ex-NBA star, who was one of the marquee moves of the offseason, that's the huge question for them. when it comes to Dellavedova and his impact. But realistically, I think the results have shown that's what they maybe need to do. So I'm not quite sure how he finds his way back in. It's a big game for them this weekend. They come up against Tasmania on Sunday. We know that last time this game happened was, for mine, the spark for Xavier Cooks, that mishandle that led to the last winner for the Jack Jumpers up in Sydney. They get their chance for their revenge. They get the chance to extend this winning record out to 5 games, to move themselves to 8-5 this weekend, heading into the fever break. Huge chance for them. Can't wait to see, what this unit can do, and can they continue this on into the break, and then what does the break look like? Can Gorge then work on some pieces and really turn it around and piece it back together perfectly for them as they look to make a championship run? And for mine at the moment, they seem the most complete team and the most likely to challenge our number one team, which, as it has been essentially all year, is Melbourne United. 11-2. Still absolutely the benchmark, Melbourne United. They almost proverbially shat the bed, as you might say, against Brisbane, but got it done. Milton Doyle saved them in that game. So that was a phenomenal showing from Melbourne to fight back. And I think it showed a little bit of resilience, but it looked for periods there like they were going to drop a deuce, if you will, against Brisbane. But they didn't. 99-93, they got it done. And now they head into a weekend where they take on Illawarra on the road, and then come back to take on Perth to close out the round Sunday afternoon at John Cain Arena. So really looking forward to seeing what this is like. They should again go 2-0 this weekend, extend this record. This is a side that I expect to maybe drop, I think I've talked about it before, 4 or 5 games. If they'll finish top the ladder, their fans won't accept anything less. They're absolutely stacked. This is a team that's just, you look at their second unit and what it delivers, and there's a number of players on this second unit that would essentially start anywhere else. Obviously Chris Golding's gone back into the starting lineup, but you got Shea Illy, you got Tanner Krebs, you got Kerslovic as well. Even Dash Daniels. Like, these guys are absolute stars in their own right. They've got lots of options. Shea Illy's comeback looks like he hasn't missed a beat, which is phenomenal for them. Walker keeps firing. Milton Doyle, as I said, 28 points. Continues to do what he does. Edwards is phenomenal for them as, getting that work done. And Finn Delaney's just got such a deft touch. So it's a stacked lineup. As I said, Sydney may be on par. I think Melbourne runs a little deeper, but Sydney are showing that they're ready to go. This is going to be a huge weekend. Heading into that fever break, we're really looking forward to seeing what it comes up with. But until then, a big thank you again to you for tuning in. Not a lot of change at the top. The top 2 teams stay the same. As I said, it's those top 4 teams I class as the contenders. They're in the mix. The next 2, there's some maybes in the bottom 4. Well, it's possibly panic stations if things keep trending in the direction they are. But until next week, we'll bring you your NBL Power Rankings again. We look forward to chatting some more basketball at that point. But keep up to date by hitting the subscribe button down below. Or on your favourite podcast platform. You can follow us along on your favourite social media channels as well to keep up to date with our short snippets of sporting news at The Chris Mack Show. You can find us on X, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. But again, thank you for tuning in. Until next time, it's great to have you on your home of the Black and White Sports. No grey opinions here.